Hey everybody, how you guys doing? I'm Eric Gerlach, and this is another talk on Greek philosophy, on Plato's Apology, the trial of Socrates, technically Socrates' apology. The Apology is Plato's account of Socrates' speech he gave in his own defense at his trial for impiety against the gods. Xenophon and many others we've already talked about had written their own accounts of Socrates' defense, though little of these other accounts have survived. While our word apology means I'm sorry, mea culpa, I'm guilty, I'm wrong, originally, the word apology, which Socrates is doing here, is any argument or explanation of your actions. So we use the word to mean, I'm wrong, let me explain. But Socrates is just giving a defense. So an apology is a defense in court, in here, and he isn't necessarily saying he's wrong at all. In fact, he's saying he's right. So his apology is not actually one of our apologies. It's not the way we use the term. He thinks he's doing a great service to Athens by forcing them to examine their lives and their beliefs critically. After Athens had become the rich center of the Delian League, infighting between Athens and Sparta had led to numerous indecisive wars, leading to the Peloponnesian War. Sparta, with the age of Persia, defeated the Athenians and their allies. Athens never recovered, losing its empire of colonies and status as the most wealthy and powerful Greek city-state. Many began to question Athenian democracy, which had clearly been defeated by the more aristocratic and dictatorial Sparta. Athenian democracy was quite oligarchical itself, with very few Athenians qualifying as citizens. In modern times, European cultures have often identified with the West and with Athens. The West is a term since the 1700s. The West is a particularly popular term since Auschwitz, the Judeo-Christian West, which in the 30s and 40s, people did not speak entirely as that, but that is based on earlier understandings. And then identifying that with Athens rather than the Spartans is typical. The Germans, with some Nazis and SS units, identify with Spartans, and sports teams identify with Spartans, and the movie The 300 identifies with the Spartans, and you can see they are emphasizing in that movie they're not too Athenian. And that's... In Plato's dialogue, Socrates is critical of Athenian society, and he praises Sparta, who, like Egypt, he says the Athenians should imitate in placing the excellent and warriors above others as leaders. Egypt was known for its scholar priests, and Sparta its warriors. Whether Socrates was an admirer of Sparta or merely critical of Athens is difficult to tell, but it does seem Plato did admire Sparta, and many Athenians would have seen Socrates' criticism as dangerous, given Athens' decline. So, in his rounds of Athens, searching like Diogenes for wisdom among the Athenians and not finding much of it, Socrates had acquired followers, many of whom were young and critical of Athenian society. These students began, like Socrates, to question their elders as well as the traditions and institutions in which the elders were involved. These included both the Homeric culture, which we've already had Heraclitus hate, and the political organization of the state. After this had increasingly annoyed the traditional and powerful for a good length of time, riots broke out that may or may not have included some of Socrates' students. And that was a problem. Again, if you do anything wrong, if you do something wrong, it depends on who you are and who you're connected to. You do something, wrong against politics, it gets political. These riots destroyed temples and statues of the Homeric gods, and blaming Socrates, the Athenian assembly accused him of impiousness towards the gods, don't stop believing in new gods also, and leading the youth astray. These new gods were likely the sort of abstract good that Socrates believed should be pursued, as well as the daimon spirit or consciousness Socrates seems to have spoken with. At some point, somebody says, "Where's Socrates?" And it's replied, he's out talking to his higher self in the garden. His higher mind, reflecting. As the apology begins, Socrates begins by saying that he knows nothing for certain. He is, I'm just a simple country lawyer, and he knows that he knows nothing. It's a good defense against the charge of holding heretical views and leading others to heretical views different from the traditional views, as Socrates does not say he has particular views, nor does he know the traditional views are false. Socrates says he is not a good speaker. I'm just a simple country lawyer. Unlike the great orators and lawyers of Athens, Athens, Georgia, who are good at swaying others to their own opinions, and asked the assembly to judge him not by his skill with words, not by his rhetoric, which Aspasia, mistress of Pericles, supposedly taught him, but by the truth. This is, of course, a rhetorical tactic, similar to the "I'm just a simple country lawyer" and approach used on the TV show Matlock and the Saturday Night Live skit, which I love, Phil Hartman, Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer. Phil Hartman says, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm just a caveman. Your world frightens and confuses me. If I turn on a fax, are there little demons? But what I do know is my client is entitled to a large cash settlement falling down in front of a preschool." It's, if I know one thing, I don't know anything, but if I know one thing, it's this thing I'm trying to convince you of. Apparently, Socrates knowing that he doesn't know makes a decent defense in court. Whether or not Socrates is using false modesty like these others, he argues that modesty and the truth is best and most convincing in rhetoric. He is also subtly insulting the assembly, a questionable move if he hopes to be acquitted. He is the gadfly. As he has said, the assembly knows nothing like himself, and they are easily convinced by orators and rhetoricians who also know nothing, but believe they know the truth and sway the assembly to agree with them, without possessing truth, like a simple country lawyer. Socrates says he has been accused of being merely a sophist, a rhetorician who is skilled at making the false appear true through argument, much as people accuse lawyers of doing. But this is not the case, as sophists, he says, are highly paid to claim to know things, and he is broke and knows nothing. It's a great routine. The whole thing, bada bing, am I right? Ladies and gentlemen. He notes that Aristophanes, who is not his enemy, but has disagreed with him and mocked him with his plays, he's like, this guy writes comedies about me. I mean, come on, he thinks I'm an idiot. Has, unfortunately, led many people to this view. Socrates says he has been accused by several prominent Athenians who speak for the politicians, craftspeople, poets, and orators, all of whom he has angered by going around showing that each of them know nothing. He argues with one accuser, Miletus, not Miletus, the city-state of the Milesians and Thales, who Socrates says is simultaneously accusing him of atheism, of believing in no gods, and of believing in new gods simultaneously, which cannot both be the case. I like the skeptical side of human thought. Oftentimes, you will find people say, so you believe in nothing, Lebowski, and you have new terrible beliefs. It's like, so I believe in nothing, and I believe in, it's like I am a nihilist, but I also believe in Islam, I guess. It's interesting that, again, people will accuse you of believing in nothing, but also believing in the wrong thing. So all that sort of doesn't yes and no fit, doesn't it? And I imagine we all accuse people of that, regardless of our politics. And this is getting political. Again, Socrates' daimon told him to stay out of politics. He didn't stay far enough, it seems. Socrates relates to the assembly the famous, infamous story of his friend Chaerephon going to the Delphic Oracle and hearing that no one is wiser than Socrates. This is the navel belly button of the world, the central sort of thread to the gods, and that this troubles him and drove him to question those who are said to be wise. Nobody is wiser than Socrates, he says. Well, now I gotta figure this out. Socrates says the traditional oracle of Apollo is what sent him on his mission. That's evidence he believes in Apollo. He says that later he confirms that the oracle said true. Yeah, no, it turns out everybody's an idiot, and so am I. And so we're all equally idiot, and I'm an idiot, I'm hopefully the blind showing the blind they're blind. It's rather leading. That it's a good thing to do if you're accused towards impiety to the gods, though, including Apollo, sun god. Socrates distances himself from Anaxagoras. Watch the Anaxagoras video and others before this. Well, it's too late for that, isn't it? Quite trials. He argues the sun, Anaxagoras, is a flaming rock. I mentioned with Anaxagoras. What am I, Anaxagoras? I think the sun's a flaming rock here. I like Apollo. He did initially doubt the oracle. He says, I was confused, which may mean he needs to test it. But he later says it spoke the truth. He went on a divine mission for it by testing it, doubting it, and he assumes now, that it meant what it did, but he did not know. After seeking out philosophers, politicians, poets, and craftspeople, Socrates came to the understanding that while each of these experts claimed to know a great deal, questioning them showed that experts are much like the Pythias of the Delphic Oracle in saying things that they do not entirely understand themselves, the goddesses huffing plants and/or gas fumes. Socrates decided that he should continue to question others as a spokesperson for the oracle, showing others that the gods have the wisdom to know that human beings do not know, but human beings themselves most often do not. On the one hand, Socrates is putting himself in the company of the gods and above others. He possesses the wisdom that humans know nothing. But on the other, he puts himself in the company of humanity, saying that he himself knows nothing. In terms of knowledge, Socrates is a mere mortal. In terms of wisdom, Socrates argues for the view of the gods. This is quite similar to Heraclitus, who said that our language sounds like baby talk to the cosmic powers, and the wisdom of the wisest man sounds like the grunts and cries of an ape. I love Zhuangzi, my favorite Taoist. I just got done with a series on Taoism. And he says, some say our wisest words are different from the peeps of baby birds, but is there a difference or isn't there? Well, there is and isn't if it's a relative difference. Socrates, like Heraclitus, suggests that even as a mortal ape, far beneath the cosmic powers, we are indeed, we are incapable, in a sense, of striving for and achieving wisdom, even if this wisdom is never, we are constantly capable of achieving more wisdom, and yet we can never rival the gods and the cosmos with our mortal stature. Socrates tells the assembly that he does not fear death, only not living in accord with the good, which is tempting them to kill him. Mortals like himself do not know what death is, and so there is no reason to fear it. That is very Epicurus. We do not fear death, for death is nothing to us. In the next dialogue, we're going to get into the credo, in which Socrates accepts his death and does not escape punishment and buy off the guards, like Anaxagoras supposedly did, who fled with the help of Pericles. And these are factions on and not with the democratic side of Athens. He argues, Socrates does, that one should obey the law in that dialogue in the credo, just as one should obey the gods. However, in the apology, he tells the assembly that one should obey one's superiors, which means that one should follow the will of the gods over the will of humanity. And so the assembly will have to convict him if they wish to stop him from showing others that they do not know. He says as long as he draws breath, he will not stop practicing philosophy and seeking greater wisdom. Aristotle wrote that one should never kill one's father. But among the Triboli tribe, the gods sometimes demand that you sacrifice your father. Aristotle is implying here, it may not be obvious, if your super dad wants you to kill your dad, in the totem pole, you got to kill your dad. You got to say, if Father God comes down and says, sacrifice the father, you got to cut out the middleman, or cut him up. And he says, so Aristotle says, the so-called father of logic, as I always like pointing out in ancient world context, because a lot of people are like, white people can think because Aristotle, and that makes them a superior culture. Aristotle does say, no, it is logical and good and arguable that to the polytheistic gods you commit this human sacrifice and sacrifice your dad because it makes the sense. Because logically, if Superdad says dad dies, it does make sense. It's just not our world, It's theirs. Very much polytheism of Aristotle. Many times you hear people say the Greeks aren't serious about religion, which is what allowed them to be so scientific and rational. Well, A, the Greeks were not known as the most technological of peoples, comparatively. And B, they are certainly saying sometimes you commit sacrifices to the gods. Plato, Socrates, Aristotle all say that. I don't know how you, open up animals to gods if you aren't serious. But, or people. Your dad, he's some kind of beast, according to Aristotle, rational or not. Depends if he's German, Aristotle doesn't think the Germans are rational. Neither do I, for that matter, It's, yes, it's sort of like Antigone in reverse. She obeys the lower order of her family in defiance of the law of the state. Socrates is kind of on both sides here, is what I'm pointing at. Socrates is kind of saying at first, I'm going to follow the gods, not the state. But then he also says in the credo, later, he says, well, I'm going to follow the state. And the folks say, didn't you say that you should practice philosophy? And he kind of, either Plato or he has to talk himself into the corner such that he can commit seppuku in the corner here. He kind of has to, because Socrates died. Socrates was forced to commit hemlock suicide, which is a privileged form of suicide that you'd have to pay for. Or someone did. And he sort of has to die historically, but he also tells the assembly, flipping him off with both hands, I will never go down and stop doing philosophy. So unfortunately, Plato kind of has written himself into a corner. Socrates has to die, but he has told the assembly that he will not stop. So how does he stop? Aristotle wrote, well, yes. So Socrates tells the Athenians that they are far more concerned with acquiring wealth than wisdom, and that there is nothing better for Athens than his taking up the role of the horsefly, the annoying pest that stings the horse and forces it into action. The assembly votes, and Socrates is found guilty by a slight majority. The assembly was said to be composed of about 500, and Socrates says in response that only 30 votes would have changed the verdict, making the tally about 280 to 220 or so. It's tallying season still. Instead of pleading for mercy before he is sentenced, Socrates, in what is a either fourth-dimensional amazing chess move or a very silly thing, Socrates suggested to the assembly that his punishment should be free meals for life in the main council building, an honor that is usually only reserved for military heroes or champion athletes because he's a great leader of the state, apparently. Diogenes Laertius, the Greco-Latin biographer of the Greek and Latin times, the biographer of the philosophers, says that this angered the assembly and that More chose to vote for a death sentence. It's like More thought he was in it, More chose a death sentence than had originally voted for his guilt, because he's a skilled rhetorician. Here again, he seems to be daring the assembly and making them kill him, and then he seems to be oddly choosing to not do philosophy indirectly by way of assembly. You know, that's one way to commit suicide in practices. The Socrates bell die in committee, you know what I mean? Socrates tells both those who voted against him and those who voted in his favor that he did the right thing even in the face of death, which is all that can be done. The best. Socrates speculates that death may very well bring freedom from all desires and discomforts, and that he may be able to greet great souls such as Hesiod and Homer, with whom he may continue to question and practice philosophy. We imagine here on the Elysian fields, Hesiod and Homer are like, they're looking out for Heraclitus because he wants to club them. But they're like, oh God, it's that guy too. It's Socrates. Get it. Don't make eye contact, back away slowly. Because Socrates wants to talk forever, and we're here in the Elysian field, so he's probably got the time. All right. Much happiness, little hemlock, and I will be soon putting up the credo and the other Platonic dialogue. So thank you for your patience, and much happiness.